Toledo 1,000 years ago is very interesting because there was a coexistence between Jews, Christians, and Muslims, which was unprecedented, and a historical case which came long before democracy, but which showed that coexistence was quite possible, even though there were so many contesting wills in Europe at that time. We are studying political tolerance, which is basically this idea, which you know is associated with Voltaire. But it was actually Evelyn Beatrice Hall who made this expression after reading Voltaire, that I disapprove what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. That's political tolerance, and that's what I'm studying, working on in political science projects right now in India, in Pakistan, in Uganda, and parts of Europe as well. Sweden, for example. That is Sweden in 1985. So we have tolerance issues here, no doubt about it. This is a very well-known photograph for all the Swedes. It's a demonstration by the extreme right, and this woman protests against the demonstrators by taking her handbag and banging it in the back of the head of the skinhead like that. This is a tolerance question, of course. Should we tolerate the extremists, such things, And this relates very much to research I'm interested in still when I go to other places in Europe. In Europe, we discuss quite a lot nowadays multiculturalism, and you know that within a few months, these three leaders of Europe declared that multiculturalism had failed in Europe. What that exactly means is contested, of course, and we can discuss this later on. But it means, to some extent, the idea that if you have a lot of ethnicities mixed around, you will inevitably have conflicts. Of course, I see this in the countries where I go to study. This is a picture I took in Uganda last time I was there before the election. And you know also these scenes too well from Kashmir as well. That we have constant conflict there, people say that at least, and there are different ethnicities, different religions, and it seems to be hard to make them coexist, right? This is about tolerance to a large extent, political tolerance, social tolerance as well, and this is what we're going to talk about today, and especially the case of Kashmir. But we can make connections to other parts as well, because I have a broader interest in this myself, but I think most of you will be speaking about Kashmir. Feel free to stop me also if I'm saying weird things or saying things that you don't understand. This is my approach for today. I'll talk about things that I think matter strongly for peace from different levels, you could say. I'll approach first Kashmir from the internal politics level, and then I'll go to the national level, politics in India, national level, talk a little bit about that, the challenges at the national level. And then I will speak about the challenges from an international viewpoint as well, which I think has become very much more important during the last 15 years. I think the international situation conditions the prospects for peace in Kashmir much more now than it did, let's say, 30 years ago. There we will be looking at India, Pakistan, the United States, Europe, China, and Afghanistan, and what role they are playing in this bigger context. I will be making some claims here, theoretical, you could say, or general ones. I think that first one is about rationality in war. This is what I write in my book about Kashmir. To understand and explain conflicts, we have to, of course, assume that people or the actors are rational, right? However, though, when we put them together in some sort of political context, we can't expect that the outcomes are rational. So this is the best way to understand how things have evolved, especially at the local level in Kashmir. People have not been moving around trying to instigate conflicts all the time, not all parts at least. And but the conflict has been the outcome nevertheless. It's what most people did not want, but this is what happened, just like Europe in what happened before the First World War. Situation which nobody wanted emerged, which led to conflict. Intentions seldom lead to expected outcomes. That's the thing here. About ethnicity in war, I will say this also. Ethnic identity is often used as an instrument, a kind of vehicle for those who pursue conflicts. That's an important message I have here in my analysis. And ethnic polarization is not usually the cause of war. It's an outcome in a political conflict. That is how I perceive the role of ethnicity here also. We can compare this, for example, with the role of Al-Qaeda and special groups, tribes in Saudi Arabia as well. If you are reading the papers and the new books coming out on this topic, this has been the conflict which threw the United States into the big conflict after 9/11 has been portrayed as an ideological conflict. But you can certainly trace other roots to this, which is in line with this analysis that I made. But to do this, then we go to Kashmir and what you could call the path to conflict from the internal perspective to begin with. This is a map of India, a very simplified one, and this is of course the region we're speaking about up here. This is a contested area. People will want us to call different parts different things here, and I'm sure I'm not going to make everyone happy here. But in any case, let's try this. This is Jammu and Kashmir, what is in India called Jammu and Kashmir. It's also internationally, people who want to stand in the middle more, they can say India-controlled Kashmir. I mean, up until 1947, this was largely one unit called Kashmir, but then it was split up after the war, 47-48. And then you have Pakistan controlling this part, and now China is controlling this part, here also, and India this part. So here's where the line of control goes, and Pakistan is effectively controlling this part, and India this part. So this is where we are on the map. But as I said, you can contest parts of the borders as they are drawn here, of course. Now I'm going to give you the very, very, very rapid description of what happened mainly from the end of the 1970s to the 1980s, which is the period when you had a situation in Jammu and Kashmir, the India-controlled part, where there was a deterioration of law and order and politics and democracy in general, you could say, which led to the conflict that then spiraled out of control, you could say. First, I'll talk about the degree of democracy in this region. You could say that by 1977 it was quite high. After the emergency in India, there was a bit of we could say, a revival of politics in India, because so many people have protested against the emergency and the Congress party at that time. So it actually revitalized politics in India, and the Congress dominance was actually, for the first time, broken in a serious way. And it became more clear also that president's rule and such things could not be accepted just like that. And in India there was a shift in power. And this was good for Kashmir, for democracy in Kashmir. And it was generally perceived that democracy was something that was finally coming to Jammu and Kashmir. This is the state in India which had to wait the longest for it. It also is the state in India which has the most autonomy according to the constitution, but where this autonomy has been de facto the least used. They have not been able to exercise a special arrangement that was made after independence for the state. Because there was a fear after the wars with Pakistan and in connection with the wars with Pakistan, so that the central leadership in Delhi never dared to let go of their control ambitions over this region. So the autonomy never was realized in this area. But now in this period then, there was actually democratic institutions working fairly well. And it's also reflected in the fact that there was a cooperation by the main parties in the region that were divided along ethnic lines, but they could cooperate on the municipal level during this period. And you have, for example, there, the Congress party, the old India party that's been there since the independence, but you also have the National Conference, which had different leaderships and went through many transitions over periods of time. But one of the oldest, strongest leaders, Sheikh Abdullah, he was still in charge, and he made a deal with Delhi, and it was agreed that the India-controlled part was to become an integrated part of India, but the autonomy was to be in place and respected, and so on. And then they would, all the wars with Pakistan certainly destroyed any plans for making an independent Kashmir, at least. But in 1977 and onwards here for a few years, democracy was working, and the National Conference was strong, the Congress Party as well. And you could also see the forerunners to the Hindu nationalists. They were working together with the actual National Conference in the municipal levels and so on. So this was a very particular situation, which is not to be remembered, because if you actually talk to people today, this period will almost have been erased in the public memory, because people are in such conflictual positions. So they will say, many parts of the conflicts will say, no, it's always been a conflict and so on. But there is actually, we can observe this empirically. There was an understanding, and there was a fairly high degree of peace, and this continued as well, even though you could see something of a deterioration of the democratic institutions. Up until this period we're coming into here, 82, 83, 84, big changes going on there which affects democracy in a negative way. Because Sheikh Abdullah dies, and there are internal divisions within the National Conference, and it's not easy for Farooq Abdullah to take the reins after that. And also you can see that Indira Gandhi is pursuing ethnic politics to a higher degree than before. You could say that Indira Gandhi is becoming more of a populist in order to regain power after the losses from the emergency, you could say. This is quite an interesting period, because you can see also that what is reflected here in Jammu and Kashmir is still an attitude where people are supporting the democratic process to a large extent, and you can see that in the way that people are engaging in politics, and you can also see that in the way that extremists are not being able to mobilize in this area in this period of time. I talked to Amanullah Khan about this particular period, and he stated in an interview that he was trying. Amanullah Khan is the leader of Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, and he was stating that I tried to get a movement going at this period of time, but it was impossible to recruit people. People were too busy with their daily lives. People were just satisfied with just going with their daily lives, and they were quite happy with that. They could not be motivated to join a violent separatist movement, at least. They had opinions about India, central government and so on, but they wanted to stay within that organization. That was clear from the results of it, from attempts to try to mobilize people in this region at that point in time. However, though, what you see here now after that is a constant process of deinstitutionalization. You can see that leaders, both within the Congress Party but also within the National Conference, are harming democratic institutions by trying to control institutions, the police force, the election commission, and the courts for their own narrow purposes. So populism and corruption are the main means to undermine democratic institutions. And here you have a very crucial situation where you have something of an unholy alliance between the National Conference Party and the Congress Party. They go together for the election, and in Sweden that would be like having the Social Democrats and the Nya Moderaterna work together before the election, going together. You know, it's people would that would go against very much of the public ethos. I think we could agree. So here the institutions are undermined. You have an unholy alliance here, and finally Farooq Abdullah introduces censorship here, full censorship in 1989, which means the death to democracy, you could say. And if we follow the violence trends, you can see it's fairly or very low here, and it starts to increase from 1983-84 there, and then it goes sharply up, and then you have the situation here when violence explodes in Kashmir, and you have kidnappings of high-profile politicians, one daughter in particular, and other actors, and this is where people come out in the streets, and the Indian army goes in to stop the uprising and so on. Now, from this point onwards, there's a new dynamic that takes over the conflict, you could say. And we can discuss what happens after that, what role is played by Pakistan and so on. There's no doubt about that Pakistan has a role here, but if we look at explanations and we take these factors into account, ethnicity, socioeconomic factors, institutions, the role of individuals in international politics, it's definitely the deterioration of institutions and the role of certain individuals. Indira Gandhi, Farooq Abdullah, for example, who play a very important role here for the deterioration of the democratic institutions up until this point in time. So what we need to learn here is there is no determinism before this saying that this area has to go into conflict. We have a situation where Pakistan is absolutely troubled, but outside forces do not play a decisive role at this stage. And you have a preceding peaceful era, and then you have this deterioration of institutions, like I said. And over that development in the 1980s, there were many opportunities where the situation could have been turned around, where you could actually have saved something of the democratic process here and actually turned the whole process around to save democracy and also to save the minds of the people in Jammu and Kashmir, you could say. So no determinism there, in my opinion, at least. Important distinctions here. When you have a lot of so-called insurgencies and terrorist groups acting here, there are very many different ones, and I will not list them all for you now, but it's important to understand that you had from the beginning here what we could say are the Kashmir-based separatists. There are some of them wants a country for themselves, some of them wants this area to join Pakistan. But you also have then, after this point in time, so-called foreign forces coming in. And they are sometimes enemies to the local separatists, and sometimes they are the friends of the local separatists. They play different roles in different times. It complicates things a lot, but we cannot see this as one conflict where everybody sort of goes the same way and so on. It's quite complicated. Now, hints for solutions then from the internal, if we just look at the internal situation here. Well, if we take this, especially if we take the India's perspective on the conflict here, well, if India is going to ever be, if they should ever be able to expect that Jammu and Kashmir comes into the nation fully, well, you have to restore democratic institutions. I don't think that's been done yet. You have to build the infrastructure. You have to respect the autonomy of this region also to a very much larger degree than what has been done so far. But you also need economic integration, and economic integration offers many opportunities for wider integration, not just for businesses and so on. We can talk about that a little bit later on, maybe, if we have the time. So that's the internal part. Let's go to India then, the national perspective. Now we go up one level, we go to the India national level, and there are things that are working in favor for India for making Jammu and Kashmir a part of India. India is a democracy. This is very important to point out. I think that India is a democracy, as opposed to, for example, China, which we tend to forget. Democracy has fantastic institutions for integration. And India has shown this to a large extent before, that it has a high capacity to accommodate many different groups. There has been very many terrible conflicts, but India has also avoided many even worse conflicts, I'm sure. Modernization is going on in India, even though it's going up and down a little bit. It's not a straightforward process in any way, but modernization is happening in India, which is very good for integration in many ways, because when people become educated and they get more wealth, people see the government as more legitimate and so on, and they will be less prone to violent solutions to political conflicts. India is a state nation. This is connected to the first point with the democracy. You know about nation states, of course, the idea that you from top-down perspective try to build a nation. And you say that this is the one language, and now everybody goes into that, and we try to agree on this. But Yogendra Yadav and Juan Linz and Alfred Stepan has a very good book on how to build state nations. It's very similar to the idea expressed by Aaron Leithardt when he speaks about consociation democracy. It is a model it's a federal model which built on the diversity. And Paul Brass, the famous researcher in India, he has said this before many times, that one of India's biggest strengths is the diversity. It's very hard to have India controlled by one ethnic group or one interest, because it's so diverse that diversity itself will hinder fascism or two authoritarian tendencies. So that's a strength or an advantage in India. There are many challenges, and these are some of them. Oh, sorry, yeah. Also, there are better relationships nowadays with Pakistan as well, and that's an important thing to remember. That's a good precondition for building peace in this region. But there are many challenges. There is the deinstitutionalization process I mentioned. The fact that institutions are of poor quality in India, government institutions are of poor quality at the national level, to some extent the panchayat levels too. But you have the panchayat reforms, the village council reforms, the structures below the state level. They are being revitalized, built up, becoming more democratic. But at the national level and many areas of government, even at the panchayat level also, you have deinstitutionalization going on. More populism, that's a big threat. Modernization, I just mentioned, which was so good, also poses big problems here, because modernization means that people become uprooted. People lose their identity. And this is, we've seen this with the Naxalite movement, for example, that this is it's a process which pushes people out of their the places where they live, and you get conflicts from this. And this can add to the populism and the polarization of groups within the society to a large extent. You have religious extremism in the form of Islam. You have the student Islamic movement of India, and you have Kashmir separatists who are very, very highly motivated and have extremist views that are not democratic at all. And also you have a religious extremism in the shape of Hinduism, or the Hindu fundamentalists or chauvinists, or whatever you want to call them. The Shiv Sena, Bajrang Dal, the RSS and VHP and many more organizations in India. You have had a very strong movement in favor of Hindu chauvinism in India for a long time, and this is creating challenges, of course. Manmohan Singh, who's now Prime Minister of India, he's trying to meet some of these challenges. To some extent, he has provided stability in Kashmir, especially over the last few years. I'll come back to that. But there are many, many challenges that is facing with legitimacy and corruption. You know, maybe this guy, this is Anna Hazare, who led this big movement protesting against corruption in India a while back. And it indicates the discontent in India with the present government and how they're handling serious issues relating to corruption. There is one thing you should notice here with him, though, is that, look at this poster here, I am an Indian, are you? There's a nationalist message here also. Anna Hazare has not only been protesting against corruption, he's a nationalist, he's an Indian nationalist as well. And he has connections to the RSS, for example, the Hindu nationalists. So his protests may have been sincere to a large extent against corruption, but he has another agenda as well, which has been turned against Manmohan Singh. And this is working in favor for the Hindu nationalists. And it's certainly working in favor for this guy. This is Narendra Modi, probably the next Prime Minister of India, maybe. And you know that he had he had some sort of role in the Gujarat massacres in 2002. And he is a Hindu nationalist, he's a BJP person, and he's very, very successful in providing for economic growth in India, especially his home state Gujarat. But he has a very problematical relationship to the extremists within the BJP, like the Karsevaks, the volunteers who tore down the Ayodhya Mosque, for example, and who participated in the pogroms against Muslims in Gujarat a little bit more than a decade ago. So we need to remember this, because it means that it's very hard to make a deal on Kashmir, saying that now we have a peace deal or something like that. As soon as a more moderate political force in India goes out and say we want to have a stable relationship here with Kashmir and so on, it directly connects to national politics. And there the main combatants are the Congress Party and the Hindu nationalists. And it's very hard to say something that could be pro-integration and appease the people in Kashmir without giving a lot of political ammunition to the Hindu nationalists. This is a big challenge in India, how to meet that and actually create solutions that could include both major parties in India today. So this is, if we come to the hints for solutions, then well, we can't expect a big peace deal. School reforms are necessary. The curriculum needs to be updated in India. It needs to be made more secular. You need economic and institutional reforms to promote economic growth and to strengthen democracy, of course, too. But you also need distributional politics as well, because if you only have growth and you have widening gaps in society, that is the basis for extremism. We know that from research on political tolerance. That's why China is not moving in direction towards democracy in a very interesting way, at least. It's because the gaps are huge within society, and that is not promoting political tolerance at all. So this needs to be remembered. Then finally, the international dimensions, and now we're going to be complicating this much more even. So sorry about that, but that's the reality. We'll talk about Pakistan, the US, EU, and Afghanistan, China. These are main players which have some sort of role to play if we are going to expect solutions or peace in Kashmir here. And I point out to you now some of the challenges here, okay? Pakistan was not, I can't say that Pakistan instigated the conflict in Kashmir in the 1980s, but it certainly did a lot to fuel the conflict in the 1990s. And that is because the war in Afghanistan and the consequences from that. Because when the war in Afghanistan stopped, there was a big market for violence and weapons production in Pakistan, because they had been, the connection between Pakistan and the Taliban and the government of Afghanistan. And all of a sudden there was a market that needed buyers. And the buyers were found in Kashmir. And these are the foreigners I talk about who come in to much larger extent. So there was a political movement, and there was economic incentives there too, but there was definitely a type of export of not only guns but also ideology and the idea that you should fight violently against the Indian government that was exported in the 1990s to a large extent. So this is this was hidden to some extent in the metaphors. If you looked at the political leaders, what they were saying in Pakistan at the time, and I'm talking about Nawaz Sharif, for example, but also Benazir Bhutto, they were saying things like, well, the people are moving from Afghanistan to Kashmir to help out their brothers and so on. They're like, it's a movement, like they are like the lava in an eruption or something like that. They describe these forces as natural forces and could not be stopped, but it was in fact more like this. This is the picture I took in Dar al-Khel, where you have these weapons manufacturers who are looking for buyers simply. This is a market that needed to be exported, and it was exported to Kashmir. There's no doubt about economic interests there as well. So the Kashmir conflict proliferates and it spreads. And things are really critical, 98 to 2003. You have the nuclear tests in 98, you have the Kargil War, the India war actually with Pakistan in 1999, and you have a nuclear arms race building up in South Asia at this particular time. And this is a serious development that was at least not written much about here, at least, when it was happening. And this is a sketch which denotes ranges for Pakistan ballistic missiles and the ranges they have and how they developed over time. So you can see that Pakistan can reach most parts of India today. And India has been doing the same thing. We look here at the ranges for the Agni 2, 3, and 5 rockets. And from this illustration, it becomes very clear that the aim is not only for India to engage with Pakistan, if they would have to. They are building, they're in an arms race against China as well. China is a factor that comes in more and more from the 1990s and onwards. So we need to take into consideration the constellations of power and alliances in South Asia. Before, a long time ago, you had the US working with Pakistan and the Soviet Union working to a large extent with India as a partner. And then up until the 10th of September 2001, the United States had begun building a relationship with India again. They had reinitiated their relationship, and the relationship between India and Russia was going down. Pakistan has, however, maintained a strong relationship with China. They're the partner which never fails them. But then, of course, you had 9/11, and everything changed very rapidly after this point in time. You got very rapidly a new presence in Asia by the Americans. It came up very quickly in those areas. And this rapid spread of American presence in these parts of the world was perceived in a very negative way by China, who saw that the Americans were pushing the borders closer to themselves. And it was realized that the new borders were, around the Kashmir area. So you have a situation here after this, where you have the United States playing with Pakistan and India at the same time. It was very shaky at first, but they have stabilized this relationship to a large extent. The Bush doctrine was instrumental, of course, in this, because after 9/11, President George W. Bush said to General Musharraf that you have just one choice here. You can either be with us or against us. That was and the whole idea was to exercise a revenge 100 times worse than what America had experienced after the attack on America. So this is how it played out. This is the new situation, which we still have to a large extent. And from this, you have a lot of unexpected outcomes. First, you got a threat of nuclear war, 2001 to 2002, when Pakistan and India were mobilizing to a large extent along the border of Kashmir. And at the time there was like 1 million soldiers just standing on each side of the line waiting. And the Western embassies were sending their personnel home because they genuinely feared the risk of a nuclear war, nuclear attack. So that was a reality at the time. The United States supported Musharraf for this period of time, but soon the situation stabilized in the sense that India and Pakistan were able to move away from this confrontation position. And this to understand that, we need to realize the situation for Pakistan as well. This is Pakistan and the map as it is drawn today. It looks like a fairly coherent set of borderlines and so on. But this is the ethnic map of Pakistan, where you can see the Balukis to the west, and the Punjabis, and the Sindhis, and the Pashtuns up in there to the left. And besides this, you have many more conflict dimensions. You have the Muhajirs versus the Pashtuns in Pakistan today, tribal groups versus army, Islamists versus army, Taliban supporters versus army and government. You have Sunni Shia conflicts, and you have the Balochistan versus the army and government, and so on. And this has led to a lot of death on the ground, killing of Benazir Bhutto, and a situation which is terribly cynical on the ground, you could say. This shows how the United States has engaged for Pakistan with aid, economic assistance, and military assistance. And this is military assistance and economic aid to a large extent here up until 77, 79, but then you have Zia ul Haq taking over, you know, and Zulfikar al-Bhutto being executed, and Pakistan is the pariah of the world and so on, until the Soviet Union invades Afghanistan. And then the United States starts supporting again, right? After that, Zia ul Haq can travel around the West, not in his uniform, but in his costume, until the war in Afghanistan stops here, and then the aid goes away, because during this period, Zia ul Haq has built the bomb in Pakistan, expanded on the nuclear program and so on, and now the United States feels there has to be sanctions and so on, right? So there's no support, no aid here, and then Musharraf takes over in the coup here in 1999, again, Pakistan is the government of Pakistan is the pariah of the world, and until you have the 9/11 situation, because then the United States goes in here with military support and also economic aid and so on. So this is very much dependent on the geopolitical situation. And this is also where the drone bombings come into the picture as well, because it's not possible for the United States to send troops to Pakistan, Afghanistan to a large extent anymore. If they want to pursue their interests here, they have to rely on drones. And drones are interesting because they are. I mean, if you're going to go to war, you have to have a congressional decision on that, right? You have to bring it up before the Congress and say, should we go to war? But drones are under control of the CIA and the national security and so on. So they can be. You can initiate attacks without approval of Congress. So technology has blurred the lines of what we used to call war. And this is a new situation, and it's not being handled in a very rational way. Even wars are not always handled in a rational way, I'm not saying that, but especially drone bombings are a special case. And here, President Obama is the hawk, because here you have George W. Bush, and then you have the number of attacks going up here, and the casualties going up like that. This is the casualties total, and casualties militants and so on. But the drone attacks goes up here, and they peak here, and now they have started to go down again. But this is a strategy which has created its own political dynamics, you could say, which is very, very complicated, because it alienates the Pakistan. In Pakistan, people feel that they are under attack from the West in general, not only the United States, with these drone attacks, and it's not working in favor for any peaceful solutions. It's just producing more militants and more extremists, you could say. On top of this, you have a big crisis of governance in Pakistan, which is quite severe. But when I talk about the unintended effects, in Kashmir, for this period, this plays out really well. This is the first break they get for a long time. The fact that things go so wrong in Pakistan shuts down violence to a large extent in Jammu and Kashmir. This is a completely unintended consequence. But it comes from the fact that when the United States goes to Pakistan and say that you have to pick sides, you know, the whole conflict there turns around, and the groups that had been supported before by the Pakistan government, they turn against the government of Pakistan. They don't go to Kashmir anymore. They go against the government of Pakistan instead. So violence goes down rapidly in Kashmir. This is just one of the sources I used to illustrate this from the Plowshares movement. But when the violence was high here, with about 2,600 deaths and even more before that, it was at a much higher level even before that. We don't have good numbers here, but here you can see, as soon as, and this is, the situation is perfectly reversed in Pakistan. If you look at how violence increases, then it goes down equally much in Jammu and Kashmir. This is that. So now we don't have peace in Kashmir, no way. But the number of deaths are going down, have been going down for a long time now, for several years, and this is because of the situation in Pakistan, that the conflict is contained there. So finally, very quickly then, I can't foresee how everything will play out here, but the big question is what happens to begin with in 2014. these are two important events. West withdraws from Afghanistan, not completely, but to a large extent. And the election in India. The outcome from these two events will directly determine to what extent Kashmir will go into a new era of violence again, or if it will continue as more stabilized as it has been for the last decade, actually, where you have had the situation where the borders are opening up, people can pursue economic activities and so on. It's not democracy restored, but it's very different from the 1990s. In Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif is facing severe challenges, as you know. He has the pressure from the military. General Kayani is standing there in the background all the time, watching what the civilian government is doing, and if the privilege is going to be withdrawn from the military, a coup could happen again in Pakistan, I'm certain. And then you have the situation here also with a very strong Taliban Pakistan movement. The events 2 weeks ago was just shocking, I thought, when the negotiations with the Taliban in Pakistan haven't led to any successes so far. It has actually, you could say, increased conflicts to a large extent. But when it was decided that Hakimullah Mashood was going to enter negotiations, he was killed in a drone attack, which led to Maulana Fazlullah taking over the Pakistan umbrella organization for the Taliban movement. So you have had a strong radicalization of the situation there because of the recent events. 2014 is going to be difficult for the current government in Afghanistan. Most people I talk to, at least in Europe and in policy circles, they are convinced that Hamid Karzai will be ousted very quickly if he doesn't leave by himself. Things are looking good for Narendra Modi. His chances are very great for winning the election. And if these two things happen simultaneously, there is a risk that the conflict in Afghanistan and Pakistan is exported again to Kashmir. Especially if you have a rise of Hindu and Islamic extremism in India, and corruption in India could fuel that. From a wider perspective, you could say that there is a risk for a new Cold War, where US supports India and China and Pakistan are the main co-workers. You can see today that China has been helping Pakistan out for a long time with their infrastructure. Now they're making investment in the energy sector because that's the most prominent one. But China wants to establish itself in this region, and it's playing along well with Pakistan. If that happens, then you have a new border between East and West, which goes through Kashmir again. And that is not good for Jammu and Kashmir or the people in the control side if you wish that they would by themselves develop a democracy still within the Indian Union, but with a large degree of autonomy. The prospects for making that work decreases, unfortunately, in that situation. This is one of the world's most complicated conflicts because of all the things I've been saying so far. There are so many overlapping claims by India, China, Pakistan. And it's not certain what the demos is for this region. Who is the people there? Who would vote? If you were going to set up a big referendum, it's very, very hard to do that. We can talk more about that later. But it's very hard to decide on who should vote and on what options. It's very, very hard. Help from the outside is not near, I'm afraid. If you look at China and the Americans, they are pursuing their geopolitical interests only. They're not very, in my opinion, concerned with building democracy, institutions, and infrastructure. If you look at what EU and Sweden is doing, let's say something about them as well, well, then you could see that EU is not supporting Pakistan, at least. They're not, if you wanted a buffer zone towards Kashmir, which is Pakistan, EU is not doing very much to help there. EU's aid to Pakistan is about the size of Sweden's aid to Tanzania alone. So it's almost nothing, unless you count export credits. If Pakistan would cancel the payments to Sweden, about half half of 1 year's aid budget would disappear in Sweden. And that is only because there are so many export credits associated with Saab Ericsson's area. So we do export something to Pakistan from Sweden, but that's only military equipment. So this is the kind of support that we give when we try to help out here. I'm thoroughly convinced that if there's ever going to be peace there, it depends on what happens in Afghanistan and Pakistan. If there's ever going to be peace in Kashmir, it depends on what happens with the level of stability in Pakistan and Afghanistan. And if there's going to be peace there, you need something like this, like the size of the Marshall help. That's the only thing that could actually stabilize this region, that you have something of a program for both these countries where you support infrastructure and don't focus only on building the military, building the police and so on. You need to build the schools, the infrastructure and so on at a large scale to actually take away the incentives for a lot of young people, especially men, to join the extremist movements in this region. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And we leave the floor for Farooq Sulehria immediately.
Copy. Well, you can contact Lars. I'll be arguing for 3 points in my presentation here. But before that, I would like to point out that Kashmir remains very under-researched area, mostly because of the situation there. There is a strong censorship. Only last summer in Indian held Kashmir, even daily newspapers could not be published for a few days. Pakistani held Kashmir is, well, quite censored as well. In both parts of the Kashmir, researchers, especially from abroad, cannot go. I was recently, this year I was in India on my Swedish passport for my research. But before going there, I had to submit a written promise that I will not go to Kashmir, especially because my family comes from Jammu. Most of the sources or the narratives I'll be presenting here, I will count on my interaction as an activist and journalist with the Kashmir Liberation Movement on both sides, but particularly Pakistani held Kashmir, and sort of literature that often is not available internationally because it's in Urdu. Well, the first point I want to make is that Kashmir dispute is not about India and Pakistan only. Kashmiris are an integral, rather elemental part of the dispute. It's a tripartite dispute between India, Pakistan and Kashmiris. Second point, India and Pakistan do not want to solve this problem. They have already solved it. They want a status quo in it. They don't want to solve it. And number three, I'll try to point out the failure of the Kashmir Liberation Project or the failure of the Kashmir nationalistic project and why is it so, and we'll also try to define what nationality is, what nation is. I will try to argue my point against this fashionable concept of imagined communities in my last part. So, and also I had in my mind, perhaps some people don't know really about the genesis of the dispute. So I'll try to go a little bit in the history, which will also explain why Kashmiris are the elemental part in the dispute. If you look at this map,
shall I stop? Other one.
This one. Yeah. Yeah, this one. This map of Kashmir, it represents 4 regions: Ladakh, Jammu, This was Gilgit-Baltistan, one region, and Kashmir Valley. This came into being in like 1840s, 1830s, in this form. The Raja of Jammu, Gulab Singh, who was a sort of local king, I won't go into many details, but you will find in this paper. He was able to capture Ladakh, this region, Gilgit-Baltistan, and he bought Kashmir from the British colonial power in a deal, literally bought it with money. Until 1947, when India and Pakistan became two countries and the colonial period ended, it remained in this form almost. And at the time of partition, there were over 560 or perhaps 70, it remains disputed, states which were called princely states. And Kashmir was one of the princely states. The princely states were like scattered all over India, the British India, and they were given an option that they can join either India or Pakistan, or they can stay independent. Kashmir was one of the three biggest states in India, quite big. You had, in terms of population, wasn't perhaps that big, but comparatively big to other states. Roughly 1.56 million people in Jammu, 1.7 million people in Kashmir, very thinly populated, 100,000 almost in Ladakh and as much here. Now it's almost 14 million people in this region. So the Raja of Jammu Kashmir, his name was Hari Singh, he decided to stay independent. Neither India nor Pakistan, and Kashmir had a unique situation compared to other princely states because it had borders with both the countries. And Pakistan accepted initially, in a way. India was sort of undecisive. At the time, you had two major political parties. National Conference, which Sten was mentioning, which was a secular party, very secular party, and allied to Indian National Congress, party of Mr. Gandhi. You had Muslim Conference, which was a Muslim conservative, sort of, you have Christian Democrats in Europe, and it had sort of sympathies with the Muslim League, the founding party of Pakistan. But in 1947, while the legal authority was with the king or the Raja, he wanted to stay independent. The other two major parties also wanted to stay independent. So there was a sort of national consensus to stay independent. But both India and Pakistan wanted to, they were eyeing Kashmir, they wanted to integrate it in their respective states. And Gandhi or his party was hoping, especially Nehru, that National Conference being our secular ally will opt for India. Pakistan was counting on Muslim Conference. Now everybody is betrayed in a way. They want to stay independent. So Pakistan takes an initiative. They send mercenaries and provoke a rebellion here. So a war starts, October 1947. Both the countries became independent in August 47. So after about 3 months, the conflict starts. Here you have uprising here against the Raja. And then in the shape of mercenaries, Pakistan army also invaded from this side. Raja's army was very weak. So he goes to Delhi for help. Delhi says, okay, we help, but you announce that you join us. There was a sort of agreement which remains disputed. India says we signed it. The nationalists in Kashmir say it was never signed. But even the paper that India produces, it says, okay, we help you, but there will be a referendum in India to decide the fate of it. So India enters into the conflict, and the armies coming from Pakistan, they are halted somewhere here. So this part goes to India, this to Pakistan, and here you have line of control as he showed. And this remains the situation ever since. what you call line of control was initially called ceasefire line. And India went to UNO for arbitration, and ever since there has been like a stalemate over the issue. Now this was how the dispute started. Initially the UN resolution on the issue was that there will be a referendum in, or as you call, plebiscite in Kashmir, the whole of it. People will decide either they want to go with India or Pakistan, or they want to stay independent. That was the official position of the UNO, accepted by both India and Pakistan. And well, the question of vote is, I think, very clear. If we go by that definition, a lot of people who have even moved to Pakistan, they have, as refugees, like my family, there is a right to vote if there is a plebiscite. So there is no confusion on that, I think. Anyway, and this part I point out right now, in 70s, Pakistan very cleverly detached it from Kashmir. They said this is northern areas of Pakistan. Now it has a status of semi-province in Pakistan. This was a very clever move by Pakistan to divide the Kashmir national struggle and complicate the issue. Which brings to my second point, that actually India and Pakistan, they have agreed. India wanted to do the same with Ladakh. They were not able to do it, but there was an attempt and a debate, okay, we do to Ladakh, but Pakistan did to this region. And often when we talk about Kashmir, we keep talking about Kashmir Valley. We are not talking about Jammu and these regions. But when I say Kashmir, I am talking about the whole region. And when I say Kashmir Valley, then I will mean only this area. So what happened immediate after 47? You had national conference in power in this area, Indian held Kashmir, and Muslim conference ruling this area. You had ever since, save the late 80s and 90s, in this part of what we call independent or Azad Kashmir, there have been relative stability. Pakistan has been able to sort of bribe or integrate, or the national struggle has been quite weak, save late 80s, 90s. Valley has always been troublesome. With the Sten's notion, I would humbly disagree. I think this area has been always out, but in different ways. The initial struggle was peaceful. Sheikh Abdullah, who was appointed the Prime Minister, he was, his party was sort of radical party, left kind of party, left nationalist you can say. The constitution of that party was written by, or the manifesto was written by a very radical communist intellectual, and some other communist intellectuals were involved. He was personally friends with poets like Faiz Ahmad Faiz, who is a communist poet laureate from India and Pakistan, but from Pakistan basically. When he came to power in Kashmir, he introduced land reforms. He introduced some other progressive measures on caste, on like women rights. He was personally very secular and liberated person. Not a communist, but sort of left progressive person. He was seen as a, in the Cold War context, he was seen as a communist, because whoever is doing land reforms is a communist in Cold War. So Delhi was suspicious, USA was suspicious, and Madeleine Albright, perhaps you guys remember the foreign minister of foreign secretary in the 90s, her father was appointed there. In 1948, UNO stationed its troops on both sides, but 1971, India asked them to leave, and now you have UN troops only on the Pakistani side. Her father was stationed there as well, a very conservative person. He has written a book where he has presented Sheikh Abdullah as some kind of communist, presenting sort of red threat to the whole region. But this was like such were the days. So he invoked suspicion in Nehru, whose main opposition at the time was Communist Party of India. He sort of, and then you had Red China just coming up. He was put in jail. on the allegations that he's working with Pakistan. While, I mean, it was internal politics, the Indian internal politics, as Sten pointed out. There was, at the time, they say, like 1 million people protesting on the streets of Srinagar only. Just imagine, it was a small town, and Kashmir was a small place. He was in jail for a few years. There was violence, I mean peaceful protest, but police is firing on the people. And Sheikh Abdullah, for next about 10 to 20 years, he is sitting in the jail or is out of jail. And every time he is in jail or out of jail, you know, he was known as Lion of Kashmir. Very popular, even to this day. Talk to the older generations. I think the Swedish equivalent would be Olof Palme. That comes to my mind. Or Bhutto in Pakistan, for instance. Very popular. He was really a popular leader. But he sort of, over a period of time, as he grows old, he starts making peace with Delhi. He wins election, he doesn't want to go to jail anymore, his party perhaps doesn't want to fight anymore. So the party becomes another dynastic party, like any other political party in subcontinent. So he makes his peace, becomes the chief minister of Kashmir, Indian held Kashmir, and wants to live a old man's good life, and nominated his son as his successor. He died, I think, 82. There was again a 1 million man funeral, but also saying goodbye, old man, to your politics as well. Because at the same time, in late 70s, late 60s rather, the Che Guevara thought had also entered the Kashmir politics, especially Valley. In 1970, an Indian a plane was hijacked with perhaps 40 people on board, was brought by two young men, Hashim and Ashraf, to Pakistan, Lahore, where it was set on fire. First kind of hijacking in the region. And this group was led by Makbul Bhatt, who was inspired by Che Guevara, of course, caught and hanged to death in 1982 in Delhi. And he inspired a new generation of young people, especially Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, which was secular, nationalistic, although not left, mixed strands. There was also emergence of left politics, especially in Pakistani side. In Kashmir and Jammu, especially Jammu, you don't have big left traditions, some left traditions and trade union traditions in Kashmir. But since the Indian left has been very sort of antagonistic to Kashmir liberation struggle, so it was never strong there. Late 80s, you have rigged elections, Congress and National Conference, Jammu Kashmir Liberation and other some Islamists, they were denied victory. So there is an armed struggle led by JKLF. At the same time, JKLF, especially one wing, it goes in alliance with ISI. And initially, a lot of forms from ISI and a lot of violence in Kashmir. In 90s, they say perhaps 60,000 people or 90,000 people were killed in Kashmir, in Valley only. A lot of violence. And as soon as ISI or the Pakistan intelligence or establishment rather, they realized that the movement is taking hold of Kashmir as well as it is secular, they split it. They introduced the Islamist factor, especially people coming from the old Mujahideen from Afghanistan. And very bad period, the most violent period in the history of Kashmir. So this time, this area goes violent. It remains troublesome, but non-violent struggle is taken over by violence, especially because of the Pakistani factor and the political mistakes made by the national movement. And last 10 years, the movement, people learning from their experiences, disillusionment in the political leadership of both secular character, secular nationalists and the Islamists, who really played havoc with Kashmir and its culture. Schools were blown, cinema houses were blown, women were asked to wear certain Islamic dress. And Kashmir remains in the whole South Asian subcontinent, I think, the only Muslim area where you have more liberal values. The living style of people is rather more relaxed compared to other countries or regions. So people now, Kashmir remains in trouble. No matter, the good thing is, yes, the violence has gone down, but you have strikes. Every other day there is a strike. Give a small call for strike in Kashmir and you have it. Now the struggle is more like Intifada style struggle in Palestine. Leaderless, not really under the umbrella of one organization, but quite popular in the valley. And that's what India wants to pacify. The Indian technique has been to delay the issue and use the violence when you need it. Pakistan has been, now I come to my second point. Pakistan always tries to use Kashmir as a sort of India's soft belly to engage Kashmir. But before I should point out the collaboration between the two countries. Number one, they have worked together very peacefully to de-internationalize Kashmir issue. The first evidence came in 1951 already, when both countries agreed at UN level. The third option should not be given to the people of Kashmir and Jammu. The dispute became a dispute between India and Pakistan already in 1951. And Kashmir has not been debated at UN level ever seriously since 1954-53. That was the last time. And both countries are very careful not to bring this debate on the UN level. So you will see this connivance there all the time. The second excellent evidence comes from Simla Agreement, 1971. Pakistan and India had a war over the question of what is now Bangladesh. Afterwards, there was a peace agreement, sort of peace agreement, where both these countries agreed that Kashmir is a dispute between India and Pakistan and we will not involve any third party to resolve it. So they excluded even UNO from here. So you have very successfully de-internationalized the Kashmir dispute. There is a connivance. The second element, Pakistan, especially from 80s, this has been the strategy from the 80s especially, the experience Pakistan army got in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, the Pakistan army learned that through guerrilla tactics, you can engage Soviet Russia. Through proxies, you can engage big powers. So they have been engaging India here through Mujahideen or whatever you call them, the fundamentalists. And India, every time Pakistan does something, India is really violent on the line of control. Only this summer, I was in Pakistani-held Kashmir. There was in Kotli, my friend is sitting here from Kotli. Farooq sahab kidhar ke? Here. Somewhere here. Pakistani soldiers went to the other side. They beheaded 2 Indian soldiers and brought them as a sort of trophy, which is very common game there. I even went to the village Lanjot in Nakyal, where Indians once came and they beheaded 11 or 12 people of the same family. And this is sort of war going on between the two armies. And after that, for like 3 weeks, for 24 hours almost, there was non-stop shelling or firing on the Pakistani Kashmir. That's like the Indian strategy to punish Pakistan. The thing is, both these countries they go to Kashmir for their war, this area. Because this technically is not war between India and Pakistan. This becomes a war over a disputed area. And this is the thing the Kashmiri activists keep pointing out, and this narrative keeps, getting ignored in the international discourses. Second point that the Kashmiri activists point out, that whenever you go to war here, it's Kashmiris who get killed. If you go to war in here, Punjab, which is the home base for the Pakistan military, Punjabis will get killed. There will be outcry in Pakistan against the war. Here you go, you kill Kashmiris on both sides, nobody cares, and media doesn't report it. For 3 weeks, my friends from Nakyal and this area were sending me SMS and SOS, please, you are a journalist, point it out in the media somehow. And Pakistani media was quiet. So was Indian media. So this is like a very good connivance to sort of engage each other without provoking movement against the war or for peace in this area. And third point, which often Pakistani side of the intellectuals at least points out, and even in India, though hard to point out, that Kashmir is a very good it's a dispute which legitimizes huge military budgets in both countries. Even Sweden can sell, not just Saab, Bofors. We can point out both. And Bofors were really used here. I did once a feature for our veteran. They really destroyed some valleys here, Jhelum Valley especially with Bofors. So this was my second point. I will briefly take up the third point, and then we can discuss it in the question answer session, which is about the failure of the Kashmir nationalist project. What I was talking about, Sheikh Abdullah was very popular. He remained popular in this valley. He was never able to mobilize Jammu, Ladakh, or this area. Although he was respected here, but was never able to mobilize these areas. The militant struggle of the 80s, both by JKLF and the Islamic fundamentalists, it remained sort of concentrated here. It could not engage the other areas. There has not been any movement ever since 47 which was able to mobilize all the areas, all the 4 regions. And then you have complexities. Jammu is Hindu dominated, has always been almost. Ladakh is half Muslim, half Buddhist, and the Muslims are mostly Shia Muslims. Here again, you have mostly 100% Muslim, but Shia Muslims. So the fundamentalists who were busy here, they are often what you call Takfiris or Salafis, the Saudi branded Islam. They were never a pole of attraction near on the religious basis, even for the Muslims. The political projects, both of JKLF or National Conference, they were not able to really steer any sort of movement, political movement here. So this brings me to the very idea of nation. The political movements in Kashmir have not been able to really develop the very idea of nationalism. And when I talk about nationalism or a nation, I do not take it as a vague project, what the Austrian Marxist Otto Bayer called a common historical fate, or what Benedict Anderson in his famous booklet or essay, Imagined Communities, he called imagined communities, defined as an imagined political community and imagined as both inherently limited and sovereign. These vague definitions, I think, are no guide to action. For instance, yes, imagination is always part of nation building. You always imagine things. We had this brilliant Swedish past. We were always very great, and these kind of things. We have imagined Muslim past in Pakistan. India has many imagined things. But to imagine something, you need a sort of starting point. There should be a cementing force. It can be religion, it can be geography, language, ethnicity, something. You need a sort of commonality to imagine. For instance, you cannot imagine a nation out of, say, Swedes and Ethiopians. It will be quite difficult actually. Would be hard to have a sort of common point. On the other hand, especially in Indian subcontinent, because the influence of left movement on national questions, both in India and Pakistan, the other thing, the Stalinist movement was strong in the Indian subcontinent. Definition coined by Joseph Stalin has been quite popular in even nationalistic narratives in India, Pakistan, even Bangladesh. And he very narrowly defined nation. He said nation is a historically constituted, stable community of people on the basis of common language, territory, economic life, and psychological formation. This again is very problematic. For instance, Israel is a nation now. It had nothing of these elements. Kurds, for instance, they will not be qualifying as a nation according to this definition. There are so many other examples. I would rather think, and I have tried to define, I will read it. A defined nation as a consensus community organized by way of a political project whereby consensus overrides other factors such as class, gender, clan, caste, sect, etc. In other words, it is a consciousness as well as a desire triggered by either one or an ensemble of tangible commonalities such as religion, geography, language, economy, even perhaps ideology. The failure of the Kashmir national movement has been to invoke this desire of being nation that should override all other factors, caste, religion, geography, etc., etc. Or the consciousness. From JKLF, rather National Conference and its counterpart Muslim Conference, 1947, they were built in these projects were built in 1930s. To this day, there is not a single project, political project, which could invoke this desire, invoke this consciousness. This Kashmir remains very divided. And that's, both perhaps the hope for Kashmir, that without a secular democratic movement there, you will not be able to solve this, and as well as the low point, because of its failure, you had this unstable factor of instability there, which has led to 3 wars between India and Pakistan. At least they were fought in the name of Kashmir, and huge violence, perhaps claiming 90,000 lives only in 10 years. Thank you very much.
Okay, should you sit? So please welcome with questions and comments.
Thank you very much for that wonderful event here at Lund. I come from Kashmir in India actually, so it's highly encouraging finding out someone speaking here at Lund University. Those were really very insightful presentations. But I would like to add a little bit to the first presentation. The assessment is that the period after 2003 is relatively stable, and it has been more peaceful than the years before. But I'm afraid the situation that has developed there, just a little bit of background, is that the decade of 1990s was most violent, which took some 100,000 lives, and if we go by the Indian official count, they admit to some 50,000 killings in the decade of 1990s. 2001 was one of the turning points that after 9/11 and after that, a lot of things changed. and violence as a phenomena started dipping down by 30 to 35% over every previous year. If we look at 2003, 4, 5, it has been coming down slightly over every previous year. However, what has become, and there was another important key development in Kashmir in 2002, that perhaps first time ever since the electoral history of Kashmir, there were the free and fair elections, which has been a major, you pointed out to the electoral malpractices and the unholy alliance between National Conference and Congress in 1987, which was also one of the triggers of the violence that followed in the next few years. So 2002 elections actually democratized the space and gave people an opportunity to go back and find out some solutions for democratic means. So that was another influence that contributed to reduction of violence, that people started looking toward the political engagements. But that period was not utilized either by India or by Pakistan or by whatever leadership within Kashmir to build upon and engage with the different actors towards building some kind of peace in Kashmir. And as a result of that, in 2008, it was a massive street protest, and on one particular occasion, one particular day, at least 1 million Kashmiris were on the streets marching towards the line of control. They didn't actually intend to cross over to Pakistan, but that was a symbolic thing, that this is how we are annoyed, we are in anger, and this is how we are protesting. 2010, which I'm sure that's not your own data, that was from Plowshares or whatever, that we did show that 100 people. It's not about statistics, but the question is that there was not militant violence in 2008, 2009 or 2010, but still, in that street protests, 120 boys, mostly in the age group ranging from 7 years to 30 years, they were killed by the security forces. So if there has not been any significant positive, as Mr. Sulehria suggested, that India and Pakistan believe that we resolved it way back. It's status quo that has to persist. But if there is no willingness to move beyond the status quo, to have a vital political engagement, I'm afraid things are likely to be worse in future. Thank you very much.
You want to say something? Or? No. Dada?
This is, I've just got a couple of comments. It's very interesting, and then I come from, I essentially live in Manchester in England, and I come from Pakistani occupied Kashmir. And then I have witnessed over the years, and I go on both sides, that democracy might be flourishing in India, and we've had some partial democracy in Pakistan, but both of them have used Kashmir as colonial occupiers. So there is no relationship between Delhi's democracy, Jammu, Srinagar or Muzaffarabad's democracy at all. And one of the thing that, the last opportunities, there have been opportunities within this uprising for India, but if you just look at it fairly, India is the largest democracy in the world, but the Indian Parliament, unwritten rule, Indian army is immune from persecution, from mass rapings. You look at Kanan Poshpura, nobody's been brought to justice. So if a world's massive democracy approves mass raping of women and then killing of children and what have you, so I don't think there ever has been a democracy in the valley. Below Pathankot, yes. Above Pathankot, the whole terrain changes. And the other thing missing from your professor, from your discourse was, I think the biggest problem in the whole region and within Muslim world is Saudi Arabia. The fight of ideology. and that goes up to Afghanistan, Pakistan bombing, Egypt, Syria, Iraq, for financing of Iraq war, and that is Saudi ideology, and that's not talked about in any discourses. The most terrorist state within Muslim world is Saudi Arabia, who finances all these ventures, who financed Kashmir foreign militants, who finances this Farooq said, Shia Sunni, Gilgit-Baltistan conflicts. And it's war of ideology. I think that was missing from your discourse, Professor. I think that needs to be. And the second one is, I slightly disagree with Farooq that Kashmir was bought. It was a treaty like other princely states. Same treaty. Hyderabad did same treaty and the others did same treaty. It is just that Sheikh Abdullah wanted to incite Valley people against Jammu people. And he used this discourse that you have been bought. That's he wasn't as probably left as people might lead to believe. So I slightly disagree with that discourse. And the other discourse in your presentation was that, yes, tribal went in, backed by Pakistan. But in Jammu and then southeast of Chenab River, Muslims have been cleansed well before that. Maharaja Patiala's our 10,000 strong army was in Jammu, cleansing Muslims around Katra and Bhadrawa and the other side of, and also in Jammu city itself, which started, I believe, 4th of August. And the tribals went in. So I think those narratives need to be included in this context. And the other thing is, we talked about plebiscite, people voting. Yes, people, Kashmiris migrated to Pakistan, they've got access to state subject. The only Kashmiris who have been cleansed is us, 1 million strong in Britain. We've been cleansed and reclassified as Pakistanis. We are not Pakistanis. And then that really gives rise to right-wing fundamentalism within Kashmiris. And their identity is being taken away, and they join wars, like suicide bombers in Israel. And so that's another dimension which is supported by Saudi Arabian ideology, that our identity is cleansed. So we need to be given our identity back. We are not Pakistanis, and we are not Saudi and Muslims. We are Kashmiris who believe in peace and prosperity. And those are some of the comments that I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Tahir Aziz, and I work with an organization called Conciliation Resources based in London. We have a peace-building program on both sides of the line of control in Kashmir. I have one comment on Farooq Saab's analysis. You had a very strong emphasis on this notion of connivance between India and Pakistan as back as 1950. But I wonder if it is not Kashmir, what else is it that makes them have 3 wars, 4 wars? Is it water? If it is water, then that takes you back to Kashmir, that they want control of that. If it is Siachen, that again takes you to the region, Kashmir. There is hardly any other bigger issue. So it's very difficult to just purely see that from any other perspective, rather than a very deeply entrenched clash of religious nationalist identities, Indian and Pakistani identities playing out in Kashmir. And I agree with you that it's a tri-party conflict. I don't deny the fact that there is a Kashmiri element to it. But the fact that this has taken so much time and lives and full-fledged wars and nuclearization and still ongoing race I think that's very fundamentally important to understand that dimension. But I don't see that that just excludes Kashmiri nationalism or Kashmiri. So I think that there is a tendency when we talk about India and Pakistan, we feel threatened that that just dilutes Kashmiri kind of perspective. It doesn't have to be that way. So if we see that way, you know, tri-party, you talked about the internal dimension of nationalism being one of the things that needs to happen to resolve this. But given that that is not happening, it's so fragmented, and you know that the forces are keeping it fragmented. I wonder if you have any thoughts as to what the future, the way forward could be, or do you not see any hope? And also, Professor Sten, in this context, I think you talked about economic integration in a holistic way. Did you mean integration in the sense that some of the processes that are happening, you know, making the borders porous, for example, creating some linkages and you know, the demilitarization and economics being one of the driving forces, but not necessarily restraining it to the economics. So, you know, if you would like to elaborate a little bit more on that, that would be useful. Thank you.
We'll take your comment, Professor Sulehria.
Yes, thank you. It's more a question. In the first talk, it was a lot of focus on a lot of talk about democracy, and as a kind of, it was an underlying indication that democracy is based on the democratic peace, that is a way ahead. But I would like to know what you actually mean about democracy. When we talk about democracy, I think it's very important to be careful about what we mean, because talking about India as the biggest democracy in the world, well, I mean, what kind of democracy do you have if the means of production are basically economic power is concentrated in a relatively few number of families, and including media and so on. So I think it's very important to distinguish between election mechanisms and real democracy. So I would like to hear if you could elaborate a little on this.
Okay, one more.
Yeah, I just would briefly add to the discussion of democracy within Kashmir and the concept of coexistence. I think, like Sulehria have said, that it's well under-researched area. So not many people know that, or usually it is perceived that this democratic process in Kashmir was started after 47 when India took over. In fact, Kashmir was the only state of those 560 odd which had a full spectrum of modern democratic politics, obviously different meanings. But it had a full spectrum. From, you know, the Communist Party was there, and the right-wing Islamic or other religious parties were there. In between, there was a quite big liberal space as well. So all these parties were very functioning, and the ruler, which is usually perceived as he was a monarch, and obviously not very democratic initially. But when there was a movement from people in 1930s for a responsible government, he started introducing reforms within few years of that movement. And when India and Pakistan invaded in Kashmir, the whole assembly was open for open elections. So initially it was some were elected, some were nominated, but by that time it all was up for open elections. So there was a quite strong democratic reforms were already in place, and that democracy was the first casualty of invasion. After invasion, the democracy was taken away from Kashmiris, and there were certain restrictions were imposed for participating in any elections. For example, on both sides, if you support independent Kashmir, you cannot participate in elections. So it had quite strong democratic tradition within Kashmir before the entry of India and Pakistan. And as for coexistence, not all the region perhaps had those strong coexistence philosophies.
or I am not aware of, but certainly the philosophy of Kashmiriyat in the valley was very much part of the local existence, and the coexistence in other parts as well was quite a normal life. So all this religious communalism and sectarianism was injected from outside in 1947. Some from the Indian extremist forces, which are now collectively operating as BJP or its associated forces, and the Jamaat Islami in Pakistan, which is also now very much allied with the Taliban, Tariq and all that. So these were the forces which basically pushed these ideologies of violence in Kashmir. Before that, Kashmir was not known for any kind of violence.
Thank you very much. Let us, we have 10 minutes more. Please, Sten and Farooq, you will.
Okay, I'll briefly try to answer, and to save time, where is Dalat? Okay, I fully agree. Well, I mean, I was not possible to explore these details, and I thought it will complicate. I don't have any sort of disagreements on what you say. What the question I want to answer is the 2 points you raised. First, without Kashmir, will there be not peace between India and Pakistan? I would say, under the present ruling classes, no. India is the other of Pakistan. You build the Pakistani nationalism as India being the other. If you read if you read the slogans being popularized by jihadi groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, etc., the wall chalking, the graffiti in Pakistan, all across Pakistan, it clearly says whether or not Kashmir is there or not, India cannot be our friend, and jihad will go on till the doomsday. Graffiti, lot of editorials, essays, and other things, and perhaps if you look into the Green Book published by Army itself or its members, same kind of rhetoric has creeped in there as well, which of course has a context and I cannot explore here, number one. Number two, what is now Bangladesh, most of you, perhaps all of you should know that it was part of Pakistan, East Pakistan was it. 1971, India militarily intervenes against the wishes of USA perhaps and helps Bangladesh achieve its liberation. But in case of Kashmir, India does not violate even an inch. The LOC, by and large, I mean some posts here and there, they remain the same what they were in 1948. India has never captured an inch of the Pakistani held Kashmir. There is a connivance. But also, what I was trying to say is, if you read my paper, that I've based my paper and presentation on the narratives of the activists in the Kashmir movement. These are not necessarily very strongly my views. I may disagree, but my purpose was to bring here the narratives that go missing in the discourses. Narratives of the activists who are have been in struggle or who have been victim of the violence there. Particularly the secular and progressive narratives. Second point, is there a hope? Well, I personally am always optimistic. If you are in struggle, there are many possibilities, and when there is possibility, there is optimism. Right now, the situation is quite pessimistic, I must say, on both sides of Kashmir, for many reasons. But personally, I have always linked peace in Kashmir and in Indian subcontinent, rather the whole of South Asia, to a larger peace movement, a mass peace movement in the region. I think only a sort of progressive, not the bourgeois kind of project we have in EU, but sort of more progressive confederating project in South Asia will sort of solve and give hope to Kashmir as well. I think Kashmir is not an isolated question. It is linked very much, as he pointed out very scholarly, the question of Afghanistan comes into. Iran and Saudi Arabia come into. I mean, you have to defeat fundamentalism. The topic I couldn't even touch at all, it was the question of fundamentalism. It's really scary, as Adalat pointed out. It needs another seminar, I promise. Many more seminars, actually. So I think the hope is to build peace movement in the region without ignoring the wishes and aspirations of the people of Kashmir. We should respect them as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, I will not be able to address all the interesting points that you brought up here, I just speak very quickly, and I hope we get a chance to discuss with all of you after the film and so on. Very quickly then, about Saudi Arabia, the influence they have. Yes, that and many more things I have not mentioned. That's true, but it has been a very important factor that needs to be emphasized. About water, is it about water? What is the conflict between India and Pakistan? What is it about? It is not about one thing. It is history has, in different periods, you know, history builds on the builds up incentives which are hard to ditch and get away from. It's very hard for India's political leaders to say that let's have a peace deal with Pakistan, because then you're sacrificing, then you're showing disrespect for all the sacrifices, the families and the soldiers that have died in these wars before. You can't just go out and say that. It's impossible. It's very, very hard to maneuver your way through in this political minefield. Water is actually one of the things that India and Pakistan has been really good at solving many times. The agreements between, it's amazing there has been agreement at all over water in this most conflicted area. That's in itself a very good dissertation topic, you know, and maybe we should learn from that, how to manage common resources, how that has been possible in this completely impossible context. That's a fascinating question, but it has been done. About economic integration here, what I mean there is that when I travel here, when I travel between the borders, I have had the privilege to be able to do that. It's amazing how very undifferent and how similar things are there. You know, the similarities between when you travel in between the north, between Pakistan and north of India, you don't think about it actually when you cross the border and when you meet people and talk to people and eat and do things. You think about it much more when you travel from north to south India, for example. Then you see much bigger cultural differences and so on. But I mean that in this period from 2002 onwards, you've seen the borders coming down a little bit at least. You have had communications across the border. And trade, I would say, I'm going to sound like an extremist liberal here, but trade has done much more for the peace than many of the other forces in the area. Because there is this common culture here, and people do want to go across the border and they want to trade and exchange goods and also culture. It's amazing when you travel in Pakistan. Everybody's shoving and everybody's riding with their M16s and the guns, but they're listening to Bollywood music on the stereo, and it's very confusing for an outsider. But there is this thing which you can see that there is a commonality, and people have so much in common here, and trade can improve that. About democracy, what I mean with democracy, well, I mean a system of governance where the people choose their leaders. I mean a basic definition where you have the right to vote as a citizen, and where you have freedom of expression and freedom of organization. I don't say that works perfectly in India and not in Pakistan at all, but it works to an amazingly large extent in this region. I really firmly believe this after studying this part of the world for a long time. We have problems with that everywhere. But if you just go out and say that because there are some problems here in Europe about censorship and so on, and you just overlook the fact that we can go and vote, and if we just say that, well, these and those families own so and so much, therefore democracy is not working at all, then you miss something important. And if you miss that, you will embrace very quickly authoritarian forms of government. And this has happened in history before, when people focused too much on the ideology of redistribution to such an extent that it actually allowed for authoritarian rule. We have had that here in this part of the world, experimented with it, it did not turn out well. I think that there are many problems here. We need to have redistribution for democracy to work at all. But on the basic level, I think it's very clear what you can mean with democracy. And when you say that India is a democracy, I don't think that that is very complicated if you talk about the basic criteria of holding election, letting people vote and so on. So that's a starting point. About the plebiscite, I don't want to destroy your enthusiasm and your fighting spirit, but it is really complicated to say let's have a plebiscite. Who is the demos is a very, very important question if you're saying this, because you need to think about the fact that you have Gilgit-Baltistan, you have Azad Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, which includes Ladakh and Jammu and the Valley and Aksai Chin. And you have three choices. You can't have the whole region choose from three options at the same time. If you say independence and Pakistan and India and say that as the options, you can't go and say that because you will never get an outcome which is decisive. You can't get a complete majority for one option that way. People will vote very differently and then you will just have a new conflict on how to interpret those results. We tried that in Sweden over nuclear power. It didn't work out as well. When you brought in three options instead of two, the question was sold for the commercial forces who had the initiative, okay? So if you're going to vote, you have to decide who's voting for what in sequences, right? And you have to say that first maybe you have to take the independence issue and juxtapose that against India or Pakistan. But that is going to split the vote in a very polarized way. So I really want to see a solution to this if it could be done with a vote, but I don't see how it's done right now. It's a good thing we can talk about that afterwards if you have a proposition there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.